Imagine being married to your soulmate, only to find out they're part of a world you never knew existed. Chapter 42 Pieces of the Puzzle Evelyn's POV. I took a deep breath, feeling the stream of water hit my face. I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. You and I had trained a bit that afternoon after I left Adam's office. I shifted into my wolf for the second time. But this time something was off. It didn't feel as relaxing. I was on edge, scampering about as if something was wrong. The fur on my neck stood at attention and my tail was wedged between my legs the entire time. You told me that it was a possibility it was just because my emotions had been all over the place after the stress of getting married, all the sex, and my mom dying. She could have been right, but I wasn't sure. I hadn't seen Adam since that morning, which worried me seeing as we normally ate dinner together. I just assumed that he had gotten held up with some important alpha business. I sighed, feeling the hot water from the shower relax my sore and achy muscles. Reaching forward, I grabbed the shampoo bottle and began to wash my hair. After conditioning it, I washed my body. I was rinsing off when I heard the bathroom door open slowly. I smiled to myself, knowing Adam would be joining me shortly. I heard him begin to undress as his belt hit the floor and the zipper on his slacks was undone. Closing my eyes, I felt his presence me and fought the urge to turn around. I felt one arm reach around my waist and pull me closer to his naked body and the other reach down to grab my butt. However, as soon as his lips touched the claim on my neck, I felt a terrible sense of dread. I turned around quickly and screamed as I realized it had been 𝐷𝐷𝐷. Miss me. The evil smirk that followed made me sick. My foot went up to kick him between the legs instinctively. But he caught it. He'd learned it my trick after the first time he tried to come onto me. 𝐷𝐷𝐷 pulled me towards him with my foot and wrapped my leg around his waist, pressing my naked body against his. I reached above my head and grabbed the shower head and yanked it down so hard it detached from the wall, bits of concrete coming down with it. My strength surprised him and I used this to my advantage as I began to smack him in the head, shoulders, and face with the detached shower head. Water was spraying out of the broken piping and going everywhere, making it hard to see. I continued my assault until both his hands were lifted in his defense. Pulling my leg from around him, I tripped backwards away from him and threw the shower head in his direction. He deflected it easily and I escaped from the shower with him in pursuit. I went over to the toilet and grabbed the ceramic lid that covered the tank and swung it as hard as I could at him. 𝐷𝐷𝐷 didn't see it coming until too late and the lid shattered against his face with a loud crash. I screamed again as I ducked from his grip and he stumbled backwards. My heart was racing and my ears were ringing as I ran from the bathroom. Covering my dripping body with a towel, I blindly ran smack into Adam's broad chest and I screamed at the contact, jumpy from my encounter with 𝐷𝐷𝐷. Adam steadied me with his hands on my face and looked at me with wide eyes. 𝐷𝐷𝐷. I didn't have to say anything else as Adam walked around me and made his way swiftly into the bathroom. I followed him, still trying to explain. At this point 𝐷𝐷𝐷 was back on his feet without so much as a bloody nose. It shocked me at how perfectly normal he looked after taking such a beating. I had been impressed with my defensive methods until that point. 𝐷𝐷𝐷 smiled as he saw Adam stalking towards him. Although I could have sworn his life flashed before his eyes momentarily. "I have something you need to know about her father," he said to Adam. Adam ignored him and wordlessly swung his fist into the side of 𝐷𝐷𝐷's face, sending a spray of blood across the wall. It knocked him backwards, but he steadied himself and blocked the second blow, swinging his own fist that time. Adam was faster than he was in duck before coming back up and sending 3 more blows to 𝐷𝐷𝐷's abdomen. 𝐷𝐷𝐷 was choking on his own blood when Adam's hand wrapped around his neck and he forced him back against the wall, the tile shattering behind him under the force. 𝐷𝐷𝐷's eyes glanced over at me as Adam choked the life from him. In a moment of weakness, I screamed at Adam. "Stop!" Adam groaned and threw 𝐷𝐷𝐷 over his head, sending his bloodied and beaten body into the bathtub. 𝐷𝐷𝐷 groaned loudly and Adam looked at me. "Did he touch you?" Breathing heavy. When I faltered, 𝐷𝐷𝐷 laughed. "It was nothing she didn't like," he said, spitting blood. Adam growled, but I jumped in front of him before he could continue his assault. Stop, I said to him. I turned to 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸. What were you going to tell him? When 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 took his time replying, I reached into the tub and grabbed a fistful of his hair and yanked him up on his knees. Right now, I could tell Adam to kill you and he wouldn't think twice. I threatened. So answer my question, or I'll let you die. 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 gave a weak smile, exposing bloody teeth. I let go of his hair as he began to speak. Her father isn't the bad guy, he said to Adam. My eyebrows furrowed. What? 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 shook his head and groaned as he began to stand up slowly. Adam's be looking for the man who my father tried to forge the centennial invitation for. He thinks it's your father, but it wasn't. I turned to look at Adam, who was glaring at 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸. Then who was it? Eyes blazing, 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 wiped the blood from his mouth. Now I can't lay all my cards on the table. Can I? Adam growled and lunged for 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸, who stopped him. But I can tell you that you'll need to have a word with your father. I drew in a quick breath. Why? Adam asked him. 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 eyes glanced between Adam and I before he looked at Adam intently. The night we came to the palace for the centennial. We met your father at an inn inside the village. That's why we were late to the arrival gala. What did he want? Adam asked, folding his arms across his chest. He told my father you were going to try and overthrow him and offered his help. He told us of a plot that was underway to overthrow you, and offered us immunity in the whole ordeal if we agreed to send out that letter. I saw Adam's eyebrows furrow as he took in the information. Wait. To my agentic 𝐿𝐢𝐳 𝐊𝐢𝐳 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐀 If he offered you immunity, why did you take Adam up on the deal to overthrow your own father? It doesn't make any sense. 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 chuckled. You're a smart one, he said, winking. I felt Adam tense beside me. My father was an idiot to listen to Malcolm. I would never earn a title if we did his way, which is why I took Adam up on his offer the first night at the arrival gala to help overthrow my father. Adam growled. You thought if you let the plot against my title go on, you would be able to step up after I was overthrown, he guessed. 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 nodded. Maybe even get the Luna in the deal too, he said, nodding at me. My stomach flipped at the thought. Are you the one who has been sending her the flowers? Adam asked. 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 turned his nose up at the idea. Of course not. Those ugly tulips. That was their idea. They wanted to scare her. If I had sent flowers, they wouldn't have been so common. So who is it? Adam asked. 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 shook his head. If I tell you that, I have nothing left to bargain my life for. Adam gave him an evil smile. You're already out of things to bargain your life for. 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 returned the smile. Not even close. Adam's fist connected with 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸 face in a strong punch that caused his knees to buckle under and his eyes to roll back in his head. He collapsed into the tub. Did you kill him? Unfortunately, no, Adam replied. But he'll be out for a few hours, long enough to put him back in his cell, chained to the wall this time. He looked around the room at the water that was still spraying from the broken piping in the wall and the shards of ceramic glass that were scattered across the floor from the toilet lid. Did he do that? Checking my body for signs of injury. I shook my head. I did it. He sighed and pulled me into his chest, my wet hair soaking his shirt. Go find 𝐊𝐢𝐢𝐻, he commanded. The both of you need to go to my office and stay in there until I come and find you. Why? Where are you going? His eyes were dark as he pulled away from me. To find my father. Unknown key. 𝐊𝐢𝐢𝐲 the man's legs stepped over her father's frail, beaten body. The sound of the man's patent leather shoes against the grimy floor woke him from a dead sleep. As soon as her father saw him, he pushed himself back against the wall. The man chuckled at his fear. Long time no see, brother, he said, smiling. Not long enough, her father growled. And you're not my brother? The man faked a frown hearing this. Not by blood, he quipped. He squatted down and reached out to touch her father's face. His fingers ran across the broken skin, wiping the dried blood. When was the last time you had a drink? He asked him. Her father gulped. Yesterday. The man let out an eerie chuckle. You're lying. Her father's body began to shake with fear. I know you know this by now. The man spoke. But your blood is toxic to my kind after it reaches a certain alcohol concentration. But, I'm assuming, for the first time in years, yours has now dipped below normal. Evelyn's father could say nothing in defense. I'm giving you one last chance to join us, the man said. Her father, however, remained silent. A solemn look of finality etched on his face. The man sighed seeing this. I wish she could have been here to do it herself. I know she's been dying to for years. He laughed at his own joke while Evelyn's focus on what it felt like to have his heart beating in his chest. It wouldn't be in a few moments. He watched as the man's pupils widened until his eyes were deep in glossy black. The last thing he saw was the man lunging for his neck, fangs bared. He couldn't even scream as the lonely blackness crept into his vision. God help my daughter, was his final thought. Evelyn's 𝐾𝐞𝐬. It was the quietest 𝐊𝐢 and I had ever been as we sat in anxious anticipation. Adam's office lights were all on, exactly as he had told me to have them. There were 6 guards outside the office door, protecting 𝐿𝐢 from an evil we couldn't possibly imagine. In my mind, I was trying to figure out how Malcolm was responsible. It didn't make sense to me how Adam's father, who had been ruler himself for so long, would be party to a plot to overthrow Adam. I felt in my subconscious, however, that this was much bigger than any of us realized. I jumped as the door on the end of the hallway opened and slammed. I stood up from the chair and waited to see Adam walk around the corner. I groaned in frustration when I saw that it was Jace. Any news? I asked him. The distressed look on his face made my stomach drop. You asked when he failed to answer me. Evelyn. He faltered and I took a deep, shaky breath. Where's Adam? He shook his head. I don't know where Adam is. Honestly, that wasn't what I came to tell you. Then what? Spit it out. Jace took a deep breath. I just received news that your father was found dead in his cell a few minutes ago. He informed me. I felt my knees go weak as I slumped back down in the chair. Speechless. Evelyn. Earning my attention again. I looked up at him. He was bitten. I felt nothing but cold shock in that moment. Wait. Bitten? You asked. Like, by a vampire. Jace's eyes were still on me when he nodded. There in the castle. To my 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼 𝐿𝐢𝐵. Hearts out saints for your unsaying patience, 𝐿𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐧. Jace nodded again, which is why I have to get you out of here. I'm not leaving without Adam, I said firmly. We heard a loud crash outside the door and the lights flickered. When they turned back on, I saw a man in a dark coat take a sword to Jace's legs. Jace bellowed out in pain as he fell to the ground. Quickly and instinctively, 𝐿𝐢 reached into the waistband of her jeans and produced it dagger. You know, Jace screamed. She lunged at the man and he effortlessly outmaneuvered her and twisted the knife from her grip, stabbing her in the stomach with it. Jace was yelling as she fell to the floor, but he was unable to move and help her. I scampered back in my chair, tripping over myself as I tried to get away. I jumped over Adam's desk and the dagger whizzed past my ear with a gust of wind and stuck into the wall in front of my face. I have great aim, the man assured me. I missed intentionally, but I won't be so kind the next time. I gulped and turned to face him slowly. I took note of his tall, lean figure and the flash of silver on his hand, a signet ring. I knew him immediately to be the madam had been looking for. What do you want? My heart was racing as he extended his arms out and smiled. To introduce myself, he said simply. My eyebrows furrowed. Come on, Evelyn. Do you really not know who I am? What gave it away? Was it the confused look or the blank stare? He laughed. You're sassy and stubborn, just like your father was. Are you the one who killed him? I asked bitterly. Yes, he answered, not an ounce of shame or remorse in his voice. Did you kill my mother, too? He laughed at this. Figuratively speaking, yes. My eyebrows furrowed and he smiled. You can come in here now, he yelled, never once breaking eye contact with me. I heard footsteps in the hallway and I gasped when she stepped into the office. Mom. Chapter 43. Heartbeat. My head was spinning. I thought you were dead. My mother smiled. Well, technically speaking, I am. My eyebrows furrowed and she scoffed. I'm a vampire. Darling, don't you get it? I felt my heart begin to beat wildly in my chest. Since when? She thought about it for a moment. A little over 11 years. I should think, the man said. She nodded in agreement. Who is this? I asked her, pointing him. She smiled. Meet my daughter Evelyn. Evelyn, this is my brother. 𝐶𝐬𝐬𝐸 𝐬𝐬𝐸. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, 𝐿𝐢𝐳. Brother, I asked incredulously. You never mentioned, how could I? She interrupted. I never even told your father that I came from a family of vampires until I myself became one. She stepped towards me slowly. You never wondered why I lost so much weight? Or why I never left the house? Evelyn, dear, I thought you were so much brighter than that. Dad told me that you were sick and that you had surgery. 𝐶𝐬𝐬𝐸𝐸 𝐊𝐢𝐳. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, 𝐿𝐢𝐳. Stuttering over my words. She raised an eyebrow at this. Sick? Yes, I suppose he probably did think vampirism was a sickness. I tried for years to convince him to let me turn him, but he never obliged. So you were never addicted to painkillers? I asked her. She smiled. No, darling. I'm addicted to blood. I shook my head in disbelief. My brain couldn't process the information quick enough. What are you doing here? How did you get in? I asked her, suddenly coming to my senses. You should ask your father-in-law, Victor said, walking over to stand beside my mother. Yes, my mother agreed. Congratulations on your big day. By the way, I would have liked an invitation. Bitterness laced her sarcastic tone. You were missing, I said through clenched teeth. That was my fault, Victor said. I'm afraid that after we set your house aflame, we had to migrate for a while until we could get a proper plan in place. You're the one who did that. He nodded, smiling. Did you get my flowers? The tulips. That was your doing too. How did you get into the palace? Again, ask your father-in-law. He's the one who put the bloody flowers there for us. Everything was crashing down all at once. All of the pieces beginning to fit together. Why are you here? I asked slowly. It was the only piece I couldn't make fit. That, my dear, is for you to find out, my mother said. Come with us. She held her hand out for me to take and my eyes glanced over at 𝐊𝐢, who was face down and unmoving, and Jace, who was still groaning in pain. My mother saw my hesitation and growled in anger. She lunged forward and grabbed me by my hair and begagged me from the room. I screamed at the shooting pain in my scalp and tried to kick her. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Victor said, following us, seeing the menacing sword in his hand. I complied. We walked into the ballroom and my mother tossed me onto the ground, pulling the fistful of my hair out with the toss. I groaned in pain as I struggled to my knees. The doors at the other end of the room opened and I saw 3 men putting Victoria and Xavier into the room, both of whom looking more inconvenienced than frightened. Evelyn, Xavier called out. Seeing me, I tried to stand up, but my knees were swept out from under me and my back hit the ground hard, knocking the wind out of me. Stay down, my mother said. I glared up at her as I gasped for air, struggling to catch my breath. Xavier and Victoria, accompanied by the 3 men, made their way across the room and over to where we stood. Are you all right? Xavier asked me. I nodded slowly. It was you bitch, Victoria yelled, seeing my mother. My mother smiled as one of the men hit Victoria in the back of the neck with the hilt of a dagger, the blow sending her to the ground. On your knees too, Victor said to Xavier. Xavier said nothing as he bent down slowly. We're still missing a few, my mother observed. Victor looked at his watch. They'll be along shortly. Minutes dragged by in silence as we all waited, although I wasn't sure what for. The sound of the doors opening on the other end of the room echoed through the silence, and we all turned to see 𝐿𝐴𝐿 walking into the room, holding Adam by the shoulder. He guided Adam inside, and I sighed in relief as I scanned Adam's body for signs of injury and found none. "Did he give you any trouble?" Victor asked. Malcolm shook his head. "None at all. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐿𝐴𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐰. He seems to be taking the news quite well." Adam did look suspiciously calm. Malcolm pushed Adam forward and produced a revolver from his waistband. I gasped as he pressed it to the back of Adam's head. "What do you people want?" "Evelyn," Adam warned. I looked at him in disbelief before Victor spoke. "I want him dead." Eyes narrowing in on Adam. "Why?" Victor reached into the breast pocket of his coat. I thought initially he was about to pull out a gun and shoot me for my incessant questioning, but he pulled out a small Polaroid and handed it to me. It was a dated picture, probably 50 years old. The edges were frayed and worn, and the picture itself was yellowing. Victor was in the picture dressed in a tuxedo. Standing next to him was a woman who was tiny compared to him. She had blonde hair and a dazzling smile, and she was wearing an extravagant wedding gown. I paled when I saw the bouquet of 7 red tulips in her hand. "Who is this?" I asked him. He snatched the photo from me and tucked it securely back into his pocket. "She was my wife." "What happened to her?" Almost afraid of his answer. "Your husband killed her," he responded angrily. My eyes widened as I turned to look at Adam. He stood there, unexpressive, and seemingly unsurprised by the news. "You did?" I asked him. When he looked at me, I saw the flash of guilt in his eyes, and Victor laughed. "He doesn't even remember," Victor said to me bitterly. "Did you know she was a month and a half pregnant with our only child when you killed her?" Victor asked Adam. The pain in his voice as he said this made my heart break in sympathy. "She was killed in a raid," Adam said finally. I saw Victor's jaw clench as he said this. "Oh, so you do remember?" Adam nodded slowly. "I remember all of them." Victor was standing rigidly, hands clenched by his side. "Why did you kill my wife?" he asked angrily, tears filling his eyes. "I didn't kill your wife," Adam said. "Lies," Victor bellowed. "I don't kill women," Adam said firmly, eyes blazing. "She was killed by one of my men, who misinterpreted orders." Victor shook his head, his jaw clenched shut. "It was still your fault," he said bitterly. Victor laughed when Adam said nothing in response. "It's ironic, isn't it?" Beginning to walk towards Adam, "the very thing you sought to destroy and make extinct, killing my wife in the process, is about to exterminate the entire Lycan race, starting with you." Adam's jaw clenched and he made a move to lunge towards Victor, but Malcolm stopped him. He titsked, pressing the barrel of the gun into Adam's head. "Not a good idea, boy." My mother grabbed my arm and yanked me off of the ground as Victor walked closer to Adam. "I'm not making her watch you kill him," she said to Adam. "I'm taking her to the German boy." Victor turned to look at my mother as she said this. "Oh, that's right. She is what we promised him." Victor turned to Malcolm. "What was it we promised you again?" he asked him. "The throne and title," Malcolm said firmly. Victor hummed in response. "I'm afraid I cannot deliver on that one anymore. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐿𝐴𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐰. Malcolm's eyes widened. "Thanks for your help thus far, but we'll take it from here," Victor said, quicker than my brain could register his movements. Victor pulled a switchblade from his coat pocket and threw it. It caught Malcolm in his right eye, blood spurting out of the wound. Malcolm's legs gave out before he hit the ground, dead. I gasped, but Adam didn't move, his face emotional as. My mother began to pull me from the room. I fought back and tried to push her away, but she was much stronger than her frail body would initially make one believe. She grabbed me by my shoulders and shoved me backwards. My head hit the heavy oak doors and the room started to spin. In my light-headed state, I could barely make out Adams yelling as she lifted me off the ground easily and carried me out into the foyer. I tried to fight back, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I could barely lift my head as she carried me over her shoulder. I felt her hand me off to stronger, more muscular arms, and I looked up through blurred vision to see 𝐷𝐸 looking at me in concern. I shuddered as his hand brushed the hair from my face. "It'll all be all right," I scowled in response, my body shuddering at his touch. Looking away from him, I could barely make out the figure of Bartleby's body on the ground beside the coat closet. There was a knife in his chest, staining the white shirt he wore under his tux. He was dead. I felt the freezing air hit my body as 𝐷𝐸 carried me from the foyer outside to an awaiting car. I could see my breath freezing in the air as I let out a heavy exhale. I heard him open the car door and he laid me down in the back seat. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐳𝐸 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐾𝐜₀ Reaching into his pocket to grab a handkerchief. "I think it's time you slept." I watched as he leaned over me, one hand holding my jaw steady and the other holding the handkerchief. I waited until just the right moment before my leg rose in a swift motion to kick him between the legs. 𝐷𝐸 grunted in pain. I sat up quickly and yanked the seatbelt strap around his neck, pulling it with all the force I could muster. He began to swing and push at me, but I sat on top of him and continuously drove one punch after the other into his abdomen. All it took was one hard hit in the neck on his Adam's apple for him to begin gasping for air. I took this opportunity to pull the seatbelt tighter and screamed as he swung his fist into my cheek. It was too late though. I had pulled the seatbelt too far and it locked up. I watched as he struggled for his final breaths and the life began to drain from his eyes. I let out a breath as his body went limp, my own body exhausted from the exertion. I got out of the car and backed away slowly, realizing what I had done. I killed 𝐷𝐸, screaming as a blow to the back of my head knocked me forward. I face planted into the side of the car and fell over into the snow. I looked up to see my mother standing over me. She squatted down and grabbed my jaw roughly. "You were supposed to go without a fight. I didn't ever want you to be involved in this." I groaned as I brought my knee and hit her in the butt with it, sending her rolling over my head onto the snowy concrete behind me. Hearing a metallic clatter, I sat up and saw that a dagger had fallen from her pocket. I stood up quickly and grabbed it. She saw this and stood up slowly, smiling. "Go ahead," she taunted. "I don't think you have the willpower to kill your own." I was hyperventilating, the adrenaline racing through my body making it hard to hear or see properly. My hands were shaking as I brought the knife up in front of me. "You're right. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐸𝐾𝐬𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻 Sighing, she smiled at this. You're already dead. Her smile fell as I threw the knife with all the power I could manage. It stopped just short of hitting her in the face as she reached up and grabbed it in mid-air. Nice try. I cursed under my breath as I backed away and began to sprint back into the castle. I could hear her following me, so I turned and yanked the grandfather clock from the wall and sent it crashing down on top of her. She shrieked in pain, but I didn't stop. I kept running, up the staircase this time. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I had to get help, along with my blood rushing through my ears. I could hear her footsteps pounding up the stairs behind me. I was almost to the top of the staircase when I felt her grab my ankle and pull me backwards. I tumbled past her, back down the stairs, groaning when I hit the landing. I couldn't move as I watched her make her way back down the stairs slowly. I was certain I had broken a few bones from the tumble down the marble staircase. I was struggling to even breathe. You gave a good fight. Tossing the knife aside. Better than anyone I've ever seen. I was gasping for air when she kneeled down next to me. She took my shoulder in her hands and pressed it into the ground with such a force I heard a crack. I screamed as the joint popped back into place. You're welcome. I groaned in pain, unable to even speak. I didn't want to have to do this like this, she said solemnly. I felt a chill run down my spine as she bared her fangs. I wanted to turn you sooner, but your father made it damn near impossible to even catch you in the house. she explained, brushing my hair away from my neck. Turn me. I gulped as she sighed. It will only hurt for a few days, she assured me. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐤, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐰𝐶𝐻𝐿. You'll never feel pain again in your life. You're a monster. I groaned through clenched teeth, finally able to muster a few words. She shook her head. No, sweetheart. That man you call your husband is a monster. If you only knew the things he's done. I shook my head. You've got so much to learn. I wasn't even able to scream when her head dipped down to my neck and I felt her fangs pierce the skin. It was unbearable. Flashes of white-hot pain searing across my neck. I clenched my eyes shut, tears spilling out of the corners as I felt my life drain away. I tried to think of all the happy memories, most of them with Adam. I tried to remember what it felt like to be held by him, to feel his touch. All of it began to disappear and I found fighting harder to breathe. I felt my heartbeat begin to slow as I heard her sucking at the blood that erupted from the wound in my neck. Suddenly, her body went rigid and I heard her gasp. I opened my eyes to see Victoria standing over her, repeatedly plunging my mother's dagger into her back. Victoria thrust the blade into her neck, sending my mother's body limp, and I felt the spray of blood across my face as she rolled my mother's dead body off of me. No, 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 she muttered, kneeling next to me. She pulled my shirt over my head and I whimpered in pain. Pressing the T-shirt to the wound on my neck, Victoria began to scream. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐤, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐰𝐶𝐻𝐿. No response. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐤, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐰𝐶𝐻𝐿. Again, no response. Listen to me. Looking at me with eyes full of tears. Whatever happens, I want you to know that I am sorry. I began to cough up blood and Victoria swore under her breath as she rolled me over on my side to keep me from choking on it. I'm so sorry, Victoria cried. I felt my heartbeat begin to slow as the darkening of my view around the edges of my vision closed in. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐤, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐰𝐶𝐻𝐿. She screamed. Her voice rang in my ears. I coughed again. This time more blood spewed from my mouth and I began to choke. Evelyn. I heard his voice faintly as I felt my body turn over. I found myself staring up at Adam's face. I don't want to die, I whimpered, feeling the hot tears streaming down my face. I couldn't hear his reply. The ringing in my ears was too loud. It wasn't long before I realized that the tears hitting my face weren't even mine. I guess he wasn't so emotional as after all. I drew in a quick breath as the darkness invaded my vision entirely. All that was left was the feeling of my heartbeat inside my chest. Soon, that was gone too. Chapter 40 for Come Back to Me Adams P. Ovi, this is all my fault, I said, head bowed, on a bench in the hospital ward hallway watching as the blood dripping from the wound on my cheek mingled with the pool of tears on the ground between my feet. I glanced at my hands, which were coated in Victor's blood, and clenched them to try and stop their incessant shaking. Closing my eyes, I listened to the murmur of Mrs. Chandler's voice as she thumbed through her rosary with raw fingers, saying silent prayers. Her husband had succumbed to his injuries just hours earlier and there she was, sitting next to me. I'm sure the two of us looked pitiful. Our tear-stained faces and my blood-stained bodies certainly weren't anything to brag of. I heard the squeaking of rubber soles make its way over to where I sat and looked up to see a nurse, who was holding a first aid kit, approach me. I'm fine, I insisted, dismissing her when she reached out to touch me. I felt Mrs. Chandler's hand on my back and I sighed, sitting up straight so the nurse could do her job drive. 𝐿𝐢𝐳 sent me, the nurse informed me, putting on rubber gloves. Why aren't you helping him? He's got enough help. Your Highness. I exhaled slowly, my drive to argue about the matter dissolving with each second that passed. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐤, Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Handing me an alcohol-soaked tovelet to clean my hands with. I half-heartedly wiped away the blood that stained the creases of my fingers and palms. The nurse applied an ointment to the cut on my face and I felt the numbness set in quickly. This might still hurt. Holding up the needle, I said nothing as she began to stitch up the cut. As soon as she was finished, she handed me band-aids and gauze pads for the assortment of wounds along my hands. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿 𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, and torso, which were evident through my bloody shirt. Thank you. She nodded and turned to leave as I placed the bandages beside me on the bench. What is taking so long? I groaned. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Mrs. Chandler said, I've been patient for 4 hours. I took a deep breath as I stood up and began to pace along the hallway. Vega sat on the floor, her back to the stone wall, watching me as I did so. Can I help you? I quipped. She said nothing in response as she turned her head and sighed. I heard the door open on the other end of the hallway and I began to walk swiftly over to drive. 𝐶OSAK, who emerged from the operating room. And, I asked. He pulled the surgical mask from his face to reveal a grim expression. Come with me. Leading me into the room. I felt my stomach sink my feet as he did so. I walked into the operating room as the nurses and other aides were leaving it. Immediately, my eyes were glued to her and I felt my body go numb. Her mangled body was outstretched on the operating table, a tube down her throat and a brace around her neck. Her arms and hands were covered in cuts and scratches, some of which were stitched up. Her pale skin was littered with bruises and her left cheek was swollen and purple. I couldn't say a word as I stared at the state she was in. It was the best we could do for now. 𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿 said with a tired voice. I walked over to her, taking her cold hand in mine and pulling it up to kiss her battered knuckles. The broken skin was rough against my lips. I looked up at the heart monitor that sat beside the table. She laid it on and my stomach clutched with every beat the machine made. She didn't turn. I gathered from the indicated heartbeat. No drive. 𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿 confirmed. But she lost a lot of blood. With the state her body is in, it will be difficult for her to fight off the virus. I turned to him. Vampirism, he clarified. Her mother didn't have enough time to turn her, but it still entered her bloodstream with enough volume to begin the process. So does this mean she'll turn with time? He took a deep breath as he glanced at Evelyn Knoll. My eyebrows furrowed. What does that mean then? Not seeing the problem. It means that the virus will lay dormant in her body for the rest of her life. Like the shingles virus. It will still be there, but she wasn't turned fully, so she will likely have no sensitivities to the sun. She does not need blood to survive. Again, I looked at him in confusion. This sounds like good news. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Why do you seem so apprehensive? 𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿 glanced at Evie again. Her heart was stopped for a very long time and that her brain lost a lot of oxygen. My jaw clenched as I realized what this meant. Brain damage. He pursed his lips. Maybe. Maybe not. She's in the same condition Warren Chandler was in when he arrived. Except her body is exponentially in worse shape. He died 4 hours ago, I said through clenched teeth. Yes, I know. 𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿 said quietly. I closed my eyes as I felt the burning of tears return to them. Internal injuries. He looked down at the clipboard in his hand and read them off. 7 broken ribs. 3 fractured punctured long broken femur shattered kneecap and a hairline fracture on the back of her skull. Additionally, her carotid artery was nearly severed, but we've repaired it the best we can. The ligaments in her neck are torn for the most part. That's why she's in a brace. I let out a sharp breath as I steadied myself on the table. Do you need to sit? I shook my head, letting the news lose its shock factor before speaking. I need you to be honest with me. 𝐷𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿 Heartfelt thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice breaking. To my 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐸 𝐊𝐢𝐳. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I swallowed hard, fearing the answer to the question I was about to ask. Do you think she'll be okay? He thought about it for a moment. Permission to speak free. I nodded reluctantly. I believe she will. The difference between your wife and 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐸 is a will stronger than any I'd ever seen. She's a strong woman, born to be a Luna. If anyone can pull through this, she will. His words did little to assure me, but I nodded my head. Thank you. When he faltered, I turned to see what he had been about to say. There is something you need to know. Nervously fiddling with his clipboard, I nodded for him to continue. While the virus will be dormant, there are side effects to it being in her body. Side effects? Like what? He took a deep breath. Vampirism eats away at the lycanthrape gene. She likely won't be able to shift ever again. I think she could live with that, I said slowly. Drives 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐸 shifted nervously. Vampirism is also known for shutting down the reproductive system. I'm not sure that biological children will be a possibility for your wife. Your Highness. Feeling like I'd been shot. Drives 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐸 closed his eyes and shook his head. I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault, but I couldn't make my mouth move to utter the words. She's going to be moved into a proper room shortly, he informed me. I suggest you shower off and take care of any business you have to in the meantime. He left the room, closing the door behind him as he went. It was then that my legs gave out and I fell to my knees beside Evelyn's bed. This is all my fault. I did as drive. The 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐸 recommended and showered off. I scrubbed at my body until the blood was gone, tears mingling with the hot water. This is all my fault. I changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants, not caring that anyone see me out of my usual business attire. I grabbed a few things for Evelyn from the bedroom before going back down to the hospital ward. As I passed Jace's room, I briefly peered inside to see him sleeping, his legs bandaged and braced from his ankles up to his thighs. 𝐿 was in the next room, her father and mother huddled around her. I walked past the room where Warren Chandler had been held, listening to the cries of the woman who loved him coming from the dark room. I stopped for a moment. I hadn't heard what a broken heart sounded like since my mother died. I walked past Vega, who was standing in the hallway and staring at the ceiling in deep thought. I didn't acknowledge her as I walked into Evelyn's room and closed the door behind me. The nurse handling the bag of blood was startled at the sudden intrusion drive. 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐸 was standing at the end of the bed, looking at Evelyn before he turned to look at me. We're going to do white blood cell transfusions if that's all right. It will help fight off infection. I nodded and took a seat beside her, looking at her hooked up to various machines with random tubes and cords attached to her body made an odd feeling creep up my spine. Is she in pain? Drives 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐸 shook his head. She's being treated with plenty of morphine. It will keep her knocked out, but it will keep away the pain and allow her to get some rest. He placed a hand on my shoulder. She's stable, he assured me. I'll be here overnight and will check up on her every hour. Let me know if anything comes up. I nodded, not taking my eyes off of her. The nurse and doctor left the room and I laid my head down on the cot, right beside her hand. My fingers toyed with hers gently and I closed my eyes, silently praying that I would wake up from the nightmare I was in. I heard the door open. I turned to see Victoria walk in. I said nothing as she closed the door behind her. How is she? I remained silent. Adam, I want to apologize. I felt my jaw clench. I shouldn't have treated her the way I did. It took her almost dying for you to realize that. It took me seeing her mother to realize it. I raised an eyebrow. I had a dream a few nights before you met Evelyn. There was a girl in the dream with dark, long hair like hers. She was a vampire. I was amused by her revelation. I suppose I thought it was prophetic, especially after I met her. She admitted. I thought it was her, but it turned out to be her mother. I took a deep breath. Anything else you'd like to add? She shook her head slowly. The door opened again and Xavier walked in as Victoria left. I know you don't want anyone in here. So I'll keep this short and sweet. I'm going to take over for you until she gets better. You need to focus on her. The first thing I'm going to do is plan a funeral for your father. I growled at this. He deserves to be fed to dogs. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐻𝐿 𝐻𝐻𝐿. Don't let one mistake negate all the man did his entire life. He's still your father, Xavier said. The people have lost a former Alpha Superior and they'll want a memorial. You don't have to come. I understand if you don't. I couldn't argue with him. Not while I was holding my dying mate's hand. I also wanted to give you this. Approachingly, in his hand was an envelope. I took it from him and inspected it, noticing the cardstock paper and the masculine writing on the front. It was addressed to Evelyn. Before I could ask Xavier who it was from, it was found among her father's effects. I nodded, placing it on the table beside her. This is all my fault, I muttered silently. Xavier sighed and pulled up a chair next to me. Why do you think that? If I had let her see her father, he would have told her everything before it was too late. I could have sent her away and none of this would be happening right now. Xavier pondered this for a moment. You had no way of knowing why he wanted to speak with her. For all you knew, he was a drunk, abusive father who she was constantly on the run from. You did what any mate would have done. You protected her. He could have told you everything just as easily as he could have told her. Don't beat yourself up over it. I stared at Evelyn as he spoke. How do I justify letting her get hurt? I killed Victor with my own 2 hands. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿. I could have killed her mother as well. But I didn't. Side effect of having a woman who stands up for herself. Xavier said. She didn't need a knight in shining armor. She just needed a sword. We were silent for a few moments before he stood up and put an arm on my shoulder. If there's anything I can do, let me know. I stopped him before he reached the door. Bury her father and Warren Chandler. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿. He nodded and left the room. I turned to look at Evelyn, who looked startlingly at rest. Please be okay, I whispered, laying my head on the bed beside her. For 2 weeks I sat beside her as she slept drive. The OSAK said she was improving dramatically, but I wouldn't believe it until I could talk to her and see her eyes open again. It was late one night that I sat in my chair beside her, reading Anna Karenina to her. I was bored out of my skull, happy to be nearing the end of the book when I felt my eyes begin to droop. I fought sleep for a few minutes before I finally put the book down and laid my head down next to her body on the mattress, a move that had caused my back to suffer tremendously in the past few weeks. I was sore, stiff, and exhausted. It was the longest I had ever gone without shifting, but I refused to leave her side for longer than half an hour. I put my hand over hers and prayed for the millionth time that day that she would wake up. Drowsiness set in and my eyes closed. I had almost fallen asleep when I felt it. Her hand moved. I immediately sat up and looked at her closely. This wouldn't be the first time I had imagined it. I was almost afraid that I would be the one who went insane next. I stood up abruptly, my chair falling backwards onto the ground when I saw her eyes begin to flutter. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I whispered. She hummed and I smiled. I ran to the door and opened it, immediately spotting the nurse coming out of his room. Get drive, ZOSAK, I commanded. She noticed the smile on my face, her own face lighting up as she realized what this meant. The nurse took off down the hallway and I turned back to face Evelyn, whose eyes were opening slowly. I sat down next to her on the bed and took her hand in mine. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Her eyes opened and I saw a faint, Tired smiled, ants across her lips. I kissed the back of her hand and smiled. Good morning. I heard the door open and drive. 𝐶𝐬𝐬 rushed in, smiling when he saw her. Look who's awake. He walked over and began to check her vitals, ordering the nurse to take blood. How are you feeling? He asked her. 𝐊𝐢 𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐬 𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐭. She muttered, her voice hoarse. I'll bet. Laughing. You wouldn't believe the number of bones you broke. Oh, I would, she said, grimacing. Drive 𝐶𝐬𝐬𝐷𝐞 and I both laughed. Feeling any discomfort, he asked her. She nodded. I'll get you some more morphine. Talk to this guy for a few minutes while I go get it. I think he's missed you, he said to her. Winking, she looked at me and I smiled. I saw tears welling up in her eyes and I kissed the back of her hand. Am I a vampire? She asked slowly. I shook my head and I saw the relief flood her body. Are you Jace? They're fine. 𝐊𝐢 𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐻𝐿. We were silent for a few moments before she asked another question. 𝐊𝐢 𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿. Dead, I assured her. She nodded in contentment. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Drive 𝐶𝐬𝐬𝐷𝐞 entered the room again and gave the nurse a vial of something that will make you feel a little better, but it'll also make you sleepy. Oh, she's got no problem with sleeping, I assured him. Even in her weak and tired state, she still managed to glare at me playfully. Rest up, I whispered. Just make sure you come back to me. I watched as her eyes began to get heavy again, and I sighed once they were closed. Chapter 45. More Than Happy Evelyn's P. Oh. I had been in that hospital room for nearly 2 months when Drive 𝐶𝐬𝐬𝐷𝐞 finally cleared me to sleep in my own bed. Most of my body had healed, although I found myself fighting headaches from time to time and was unable to walk on my own until my leg was healed fully. Adam, 𝐊𝐢 𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿 took full advantage of the situation and found every way one could possibly imagine to baby me and used every excuse to carry me around. I have legs, I groaned as he picked me up from the wheelchair to place me into the bath. You have one functioning leg. I rolled my eyes and sucked in a quick breath when he set me down into the hot water. Too hot? I shook my head. It's perfect. 𝐊𝐢 𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿. It had been too long since I had been able to take a bath. The warm water immediately relaxed my tired and stiff body. Adam rolled up a towel and placed it behind my neck as I laid back into the tub. Thank you. 𝐊𝐢 𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿. He nodded in response, his eyes anxiously glancing over my body. I'm fine, I assured him. He sighed and sat down next to the tub. You should go get some sleep. 𝐊𝐢 𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐻𝐿. The dark circles around his eyes and his tired expression had been worrying me for quite a while, but he was stubborn. He refused to leave me alone. I'm fine, he assured me. I laughed as he struggled to fight off a yawn. Go, I said. I'll be fine here. He gave me a wary look. How do you plan on getting out of the bath when you're done? I still have one functioning leg, I reminded him. Adam rolled his eyes and laughed. I watched as he pulled an envelope from his pants pocket and handed it to me. What is this? Taking it from him. They found it on your dad the day that he died. I've been waiting for the right time to give it to you, but I figured there wouldn't really ever be one. I turned the envelope over in my hands, immediately recognizing my dad's handwriting. Have you read it? No, but I can read it first if you want me to. I took a deep breath and shook my head as I tore open the envelope and pulled out the letter. Words filled the front and back, and I took a shaky breath as I began to read silently. My dearest Evelyn, I'm so sorry. There aren't sufficient words I could use to express how deeply sorry I am. I put you through things that no daughter should ever have to experience, and for that I will never be able to adequately apologize. I am writing this letter to you to tell you things that I could never muster enough courage to tell you while you were still living under my roof. I know now, with Adam, you are safe and you can handle the truth. I want you to know, with these truths, I do not ask for your forgiveness, only your understanding. Your mother is not addicted to painkillers. She's a vampire. When you were 9 years old, I told you that she had surgery to lose weight. I lied, and I did so to protect you. The truth is, your mother comes from a family of vampires, only she wasn't born one herself. Her brother turned her in order to seek revenge against me for the things that lycanthropes were accountable for. One of those things was the death of his wife. Your mother never told me about her family until Victor showed up on our doorstep, demanding to see her. That was the day your mother died. I lost the woman I loved, and you lost your mother. The woman that returned in her place, that filled her body, was not the woman I fell in love with. This woman was a monster. The only way I could escape this monster was through alcohol. You see, she was out for my blood and yours from that day on. Because blood becomes toxic to a vampire once it is concentrated with enough alcohol. I started to drink in order to keep her away from me. If I'm being honest, I never liked the taste of it. But I suppose it tasted better than death would. If you can recall, or maybe you've blocked these memories from your mind, this is when the abuse started. I couldn't bring myself to start making you drink as well. You were only a child. Because of this, I needed to find other ways to keep you away from your mother. But you were stubborn like I am. You would never leave the house unless you wanted to. So I had to make you want to. I promise you with everything within me that I never took pleasure in insulting or hurting you. It hurt more than I can put into words to watch myself become a monster in your eyes. Especially since I knew that the real monster was the woman you mistook for your mother. But, as a father, I had to make a sacrifice. Your life was worth so much more to me than your love was. I had no other choice. There was no way I could send you away. Your mother's family was never an option, and neither was my family. I know I told you that my parents were dead, but that was also a lie. My father was the beta superior of Europe. As a pure blood, I was expected to wait for my mate to get married. But that all changed when I met your mother, and I was disowned by my family when I married her. I wanted desperately to tell you this, since I knew you would be confused as to why a seemingly ordinary lycanthrope like yourself earned a mate. You are not ordinary. Evelyn, you are a strong young woman that comes from lycanthrope royalty. I should have told you and Adam this before you left the house that morning, but I could not risk your mother hearing me. Tell Adam a few things for me, the first being that I am not an example of how you are to be treated. He is to treat you like the queen you are, and you are not to expect anything less from him. He is to respect you and to honor you. The second thing I'd like you to tell him is that the rogue he came looking for in the first place never existed. Our neighboring pack had mistaken Victor for one of their own when they caught him crossing pack lines. Victor was in our house the night you met Adam, which is why I told you not to come home. The men Adam left behind got too close to figuring this out, which was why your mother and Victor kidnapped Warren Chandler. To throw off their scent, I went looking for Warren Chandler, only to come home to a house that had been burnt to the ground after I found him and placed him where the men in Adam's pack could find him. If Warren survived, I want you to tell he and Mrs. Chandler thank you for me. They practically raised you and offered you food and shelter when you didn't get that from me. I will forever be in their debt. I love you, Evelyn Schubert. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I only hope that you understand now that I did what I had to do to protect you. I wish I could have been at your wedding, and I wish that I could see those beautiful children you two will undoubtedly have. Live well. All the love in this world, Dad. I was crying as Adam took the letter from my hands and read it for himself. I couldn't believe that I hated that man. There was a time in my life that I had wished him dead. And now, I wished more than anything that he was there. I wanted to hug his neck and tell him that I forgave him. Wow, Adam breathed out as he finished reading. I let out a sniffle and wiped my tears away as they fell. I'm sorry I ever called your father a coward. He apologized. I cried as Adam leaned forward over the tub and kissed my temple. Tears were still falling as I washed my body quickly and Adam helped me from the bath. After changing me into one of his shirts and underwear, he helped me into the bed. I sighed as my back hit the comfortable mattress. I read the letter as Adam showered, putting it on the nightstand once I finished. Adam turned out the lights and got into the bed next to me. All those years, I whispered, I hated the man that was only trying to protect me. Adam sighed as his hand found mine under the covers. You can't blame yourself. You had no way of knowing. It doesn't excuse him for what he did all those years. I know, I whispered. Adam rolled over and wrapped his arms around me gently. I'm so glad to be able to hold you again, he admitted. I'm glad you're holding me again. He leaned over to kiss my lips gently. I love you. I love you too. I watched helplessly as Jace packed his bags into the car. I couldn't help him or Adam as they did so while I was on crutches. I don't understand why you have to go. To my 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬. Jace stopped packing and took a deep breath. He hobbled over to me, his legs still recovering, and he placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm no longer fit to be beta. My legs will never recover fully, meaning I'm a useless fighter. I need some time to get away and be normal. I looked to you, who stood beside me, and sighed. You're going to. She gave me a grim smile and nodded. We're going to work things out. We both needed a wake-up call, and I guess there isn't one better than almost dying. Jace leaned over and kissed her forehead. You'll see us again. I hugged you as tight as I could and she hugged me back. I'll miss you, I said honestly. She smiled, tears filling her eyes. I'll miss you too. Adam finished loading the last bag into the SUV and shut the trunk. He and Jay shook hands as he wished them safe travels. Let us know if you're ever in Australia, Jay said. Adam came to stand next to me, wrapping an arm around my waist to help me take some weight off my leg. Well, do. I watched with teary eyes as the two of them got into the car and drove away. I looked up to Adam. What are you going to do without a beta? He smiled as he looked down at me. Who needs a beta when you've got a Luna? You're leaving too. I stared incredulously at the bags and suitcases that Vega and had packed. There's no need for us to stay any longer, Mrs. Chandler said. I took a deep breath and let it only. Where will you go? The boys and I are going home, Mrs. Chandler responded. I looked at Vega as she said this. Where are you going? Nigeria, she said smiling. N.W. Abu Easy asked me to marry him. To my 𝐊𝐴𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Great, I said slowly. But, Vega, he's a pure blood. What are you going to do if he finds his mate? He's already found her, she responded. She died a few years ago. I'm sorry, I said quickly, feeling guilty for asking. She smiled. I think there's a future there. To my 𝐊𝐴𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I just want to be happy. I smiled and nodded. I hope you are happy there. To my 𝐊𝐴𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She leaned forward and hugged me, and I returned it after a few seconds. Stay safe. To my 𝐊𝐴𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Vega nodded as she pulled away. I will. Adam called for someone to help them pack their bags as we followed them to an awaiting car. Mrs. Chandler turned to us and smiled. Thank you for everything, she said earnestly. Anytime. To my 𝐊𝐴𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Let us know if you need anything else. She smiled. Thank you. I hugged the twins before they dashed off to the car with Vega and their mother. I watched with teary eyes as they pulled away. You okay? Immerse. I nodded, wiping the tears from my cheeks. It's so hard to be here, I admitted, especially with everything that has happened. He turned to look at the castle. Let's move then, he suggested. I stared at him wide-eyed. You can't be serious. He smiled and nodded. I am serious. Where do you want to go? I laughed in disbelief. I don't know. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐬. He thought about it for a moment. What about Germany? Germany. Are you sure? He nodded. You've a family there. He reminded me. I'm sure they'd love to meet you. Let's do it. And we did. Nearly 3 months later, we were completely moved into the castle 𝐸𝐷 I had stayed in when we visited Germany the first time. Xavier and Victoria stayed in Canada so the pack there could be looked after. It was just Adam and I in the new, huge castle. It's so empty, I commented, standing in the ballroom. He hummed in response. Once the maids and butlers get here, it won't be so bad. That's not it. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐬. Shaking my head, he looked at me quizzically. What did drive the OSA case say our chances were for having kids? He took a deep breath. I knew it was a touchy subject. It wasn't something we talked about often. Slim, he said finally. I bit the inside of my cheek. Want to try and prove him wrong? I'd be more than happy to. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Exactly 2 years and 5 days after the death of my father, 𝐾𝐥𝐳𝐸𝐬 was born. He had my brown hair and Adam's brilliant blue eyes. That, however, was where the similarities ended. Cain was born a vampire, yet he was also still a lycanthrope hybrid. The OSAK had called him. He was the first of his kind. Although he was certainly one of a kind, Adam and I raised him normally. We didn't know how else to. As he grew, he began to turn into one of the most temperamental people I had ever met. Cain was smart, cunning even. He was strong and healthy, but when watching him closely, I could see the fire within him. It scared me. One day, I heard he and Adam talking to each other as I walked past Adam's office. Adam was attempting to explain to the 4-year-old the duties that he had as alpha. Cain couldn't seem to understand why his father worked with other alphas instead of working by himself. Well, Adam explained, we all work as a team. I can't rule the whole world by myself. Cain was quiet for a few moments. I will when I become alpha, he said firmly. Adam laughed. And sure you will. Now go get ready for bed. I opened the door to the office as Cain ran past me to his bedroom. Does he not worry you? I asked Anne. Adam shook his head. Does he worry you? I nodded. How many other 4-year-olds do you know that talk about world domination? Laughing, he tried to bite me yesterday. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Most toddlers bite. Darling, I shook my head. He worries me. Barbaric. He listens to his instinct, Adam said, standing from his chair. I can't imagine what it would be like to have hearing and vision the way he does. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. How are your plans coming along for Asia? He nodded. Pretty well. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It will be hours in no time. I shook my head, laughing. Why can't you be happy with the land you already have? I am happy with the land I already have, he said defensively. I just want more of it. See, that's where Cain gets it from, I said laughing. What? This whole idea of world domination. He laughed. What can I say? I'm a role model. I rolled my eyes as he leaned over to kiss my neck. You're something else. That's for sure. Come on. Is that the best you can do? He asked me, his lips trailing along my jaw. You're stubborn and you've got an ego the size of the moon. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐧 𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐻 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐧 He lifted me up onto his desk and began to unbutton my shirt. What else? He asked me. You think you know everything. You're cunning and smart. You have the body of a god. Adam laughed at his lips returning to my neck as he pulled off his own shirt. I think the word you're looking for is perfect. His hand sliding up my skirt. No, I said. That's not it. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐧 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐿𝐬𝐼𝐴𝐻𝐻 No then, what? I thought about it for a moment. Adam smiled as he pulled off his belt. Darling, I can show you Primal. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.